Now, so much of history is history in the making, or so it would appear. There are anchors that other humans know about in this territory, in the intercontinental design. For instance, I've talked about this several times. It's like, I really feel it's like beating a dead horse, but whatever. There's 4 faces on Mount Rushmore. They call it the Black Hills. It's in South Dakota. It's a national treasure. It's a national monument. It's important. It also matches our monetary system. Some of the faces may have changed, but there's been other investments that were noteworthy that did not make it to the Monumental 4. However that works. I'm not that in the know by whatever. For me, I just listen to part of the way that they're speaking of Lincoln's dilemma. And I myself said, okay, so if it was where he was a really great employer and he had really great employees, and for some reason there was an economic shift and they were going away from planting crops and being able to supply whatever in wherever this took place. It just sounds like that in the 1800s, which is the time frame, it's 1, 8, and then it's 2 other numbers, I don't know. It's the century 18. I arrived in century 19. Now it's century 20. Alexander and 3 of my children arrived in century 20. It sounds like work ended in century 18. That's where my ink understanding ceases, because I was not educated. It seems that there's a lot more humans of a variety that have stayed in these areas. Some have shifted and moved, and they've been almost taking part in a redirection of future based on wherever they settled. And they know a lot more than my parents before me and that I was taught in the state of New York. I can hear it in their voices as they speak. And then there's more migration on top of it, and now it's been over 100 years. So now they have a piece on, I'm sure it was sponsored by something. The clip just before shows the NFL human Nate that's been on the BS in the mornings, and they Nickelodeon slimed him green. He also found his photo green in a bucket of slime. So I don't know who sponsored this historical interpretation or version of Lincoln's dilemma, but that's what they put on this morning on this particular channel for this founding father, which is found on the penny, Penny.
For understanding not just where we've been, but where we might go. And I think this documentary does a good job at showing like what is possible.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't come to a civil war again.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, right. Absolutely, yeah.
But it is a lesson that we've been through worse, and we can get through this.
Now, is that when the Civil War happened? Because again, the teachings in the state of New York have not, in my life frame, I don't know how other children have been taught, educated. I don't know who was deployed to do the teaching of the teachers. who then disseminated the information to the youth, who then grow up and become teachers themselves, and so on and so forth. That's where my cycle has been disrupted. In the unrest in the American colonies. So my language, my vocabulary is not as versed in these topics because I was not taught this version of history by any historian or any version of historian that was implanted in this growing whatever swarm. It feels as though.
Going back to Lincoln, one of the things I thought was fascinating is the idea that he's the great emancipator. This was not a nickname that he welcomed politically. And something you
Again, emancipator. Those usually are man of the hour, related or relatable to founding fathers and to the origins of the whatever. Emancipation is not, it doesn't have the building blocks in that one vocabulary word to fit much more. So I don't know what this emancipation word is regarding because, again, I wasn't offered education or an ability to discuss it, study it, whatever. But that's my overlay parlay, just that I have a pen. And I'm looking for the great white with sharp teeth. And I'm just this little baby seal on his nose because, again, I have message from New York about the level of education that scares me when I see this much education on this topic, and I've been left out.
something you talk about, Kelly.
Yeah, he is not the great emancipator, and he pushed back on that idea himself. You know, scholars for decades have really been saying that the enslaved freed themselves, that they had to get to Union lines, they had to run away, they had to take the agency to do it themselves.
That doesn't sound like a friendly employment breakup. That doesn't sound like a bonded with certain expectations. That sounds very much like Rover, Rover, don't come over kind of a thing. I know I've seen on a program called Vice, VICE, where they go into like drug cartels and like they speak to the agents that are allowed to put agent before their born name in scary documentaries. So just that little spoken let out just leads me to like, again, I don't have access to the details that actually happen, the facts, but I only have some televised version that is spoken through other messengers in order to try to understand or follow along.
And so Lincoln says over and over again, I did not free you. God made you free.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because...
Now that's interesting, God. 'Cause that's not the God that I'm speaking of with a Sharpie pen and cellophane. There's some meeting somewhere in between that allowed whatever or some circumstance to try to circumvent some other whatever. But that's where it gets really hazy. And I don't know that anybody really knows for sure at my level. And that's what's really frightening. When I've been derailed from an eo-me-eo relationship, and there's other things like this level of sunlight is not healthy for any human, and we get caught up in this for some reason.
because we only sort of know Lincoln by that one-liner, Lincoln freed the slaves.
Yeah.
And it's so much more complicated and nuanced than that.
And Lincoln also had some other ideas after the slaves were freed about what to do with integrating the country. Jelena, you want to take that one?
I mean, he followed a really torturous path, because initially he believed, in the early versions of the Emancipation Proclamation, were paired with this idea that the free black population would then be sent out of the country.
Now, this gentleman would have been born somewhere in the 19th century. He would never have been able to speak to Lincoln himself because Lincoln was 18th century. So this gentleman is now speaking in the 20th century, but arrived somewhere in the 19th century. Just so we're clear on vetting.
And they had various ideas about where these people could go, and people flirted with the idea of sending all of the freed blacks to Haiti. And over time, and of course,
So that was a floated idea about if the populace or the population had come from somewhere else before the employment issue arrived, that they would send them back. That's interesting.
And of course, this is going back to the dialogue with Frederick Douglass. He comes to understand that this is not workable, that these people are a foundational part of what the United States is.
Is there, any way to vet that? Frederick Douglass? Because that sounds, it doesn't sound advantageous for the founding fathers. It sounds like putting their future ancestors and themselves directly in harm's way by directing some whatever in this narrative.
And we have to clear some sort of path for them to be included.
There are so many layers to this docuseries. It's beautifully done and beautifully told.
Cleared a layer. So by that, does he expect the founding fathers that have a responsibility to their ancestors, myself included, to take care of us with whatever is farmed or whatever? Is he suggesting that they starve me and take care of non-ancestral obligations before their own family members? I'm just curious because it's what it sounds like.
The fate of democracy hanging in the balance. Abraham Lincoln trying to make both sides happy. But I want to get back to something you said. You mentioned it being a roadmap. I couldn't help but to draw parallels to exactly what is going on right now. And I almost thought we're taking a U-turn because what we have been going through over the last couple of years, it's almost like you can take it and put it over the picture of the past and just trace it. Was that a huge part of this docuseries to remind Americans where we could be headed if we don't find a way to get on the same page?
Yeah, I think, not to be alarmist or anything like that, but I do think that the past should be a cautionary tale for all of us. It should show us where we have been and how we got down this horrible road.
But see, that's the thing, is that the past doesn't really document accurately, nor has it been versed properly, because it's been skewed in such a way that the narrative has been aggressively portrayed in an advantageous manner that is in direct dissidence with what was original or what was needed or what was granted rock and paper. So it really becomes, again, they say America. America, last time I checked, has different labels. There's a North America, Central America, South America. Then someone threw in a Latin America over a South America. So I'm sitting with closest proximity to the rock with matching paper in a North America territory. I don't understand when there's a Central and a South America why this talk of the table is being presented while I'm in a disadvantaged class at the moment in North America, closest to the rock, which has set parameters. I don't understand how this is some obligatory or some conversation that's monopolizing the necessity of marriage, safety, and taking care of my person within this large consortium of issues and whatever. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, it's solar system, it's Milky Way, it's universe, it's galaxies broken. I can see right here the light coming in is, this is just dangerous level lighting. This ties into the fact that the conversation has been misrouted for some reason, and neglect has been paid to the most obvious and the most important feature. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. And it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza.